Hi everyone, and welcome to another video on my channel. My name is Busi, and this is a space where I talk all things life abroad as a South African living in Canada, as well as self-care. In today's video, I want to take you through the process of getting a driver's license in Canada, Ontario, and also show you some of the things that have been different that I've experienced driving in Canada. Do stay tuned for that, just to see some of those things and what they are. Now, I did specifically mention that this is going to be around Ontario, getting a driver's license in Ontario, and that is because in Canada, unlike South Africa, so South Africa, whether you live in Gauteng, you're in Mpumalanga, wherever you are, whichever province that you're in, you can have one driver's license. And you can move from Gauteng and you go to the Western Cape or wherever else, Eastern Cape, and you'll be able to use that one driver's license, and nobody's going to ask that you change it or get one for a specific province. But the way that things work here in Canada, there's different rules depending on the province that you're in. So that's why I say I'm going to speak around Ontario, and really if things do change in terms of how the laws and all of the things are after the course of this video being made, the links that I'm going to add in the description are going to be the government's links, so you can find the latest information on all of the waiting periods and all of the processes in there. There are 3 parts to getting your license, and that's the G1, G2, and the full G driver's license. Number 1, if you are a person that doesn't have a driver's license and you need to go through the process of getting the driver's license, there's going to be 3 parts to it. The first part of it will be getting your G1 license. Now, the G1 license, I can equate that in the South African terms of getting a driver's license to a learner's license. So you'll go do the eye test and you do a written test after you study, and study through the booklet that they have. Like, it's similar to the K53 in South Africa, but it looks different, and it's specific for all of the different things that the roads in Canada have and the laws that Canada have around driving in Canada. So you study and then you go and write a written test, and then after you pass that test, you have your G1 license. You can then drive in Ontario, but there are a number of restrictions, and that's something you're going to get familiar with as you're studying. Now, the difference also here in Canada is that you will have to have that G1, so the learner's license, for 8 months, and this is Ontario, specific to Ontario. In other provinces, they require you to have the G1 license for a year before you can go for a road test to get your G2 license. So the second part of the process is the G2. So now you've had your G1, you've been driving for at least 8 months in Ontario, and you can go and take the G2 license, driver's test. So you test G2 and you get that, and then now you can drive a bit further. So there's less rules around it, but you are still not allowed to do certain things without having somebody who has a full G license. So this is another thing that is just so different to how the driving license process works in South Africa, and I'm pretty sure in other parts of the world, because you have to now have the G2 license for at least 2 years before you can go and attempt another driving test to get the full G license, where you can drive by yourself. You don't have to have somebody with you who has a full license, and now you are considered an individual who can drive, hopefully responsibly, and if you can't, your license will be taken away from you. But the process is quite lengthy. The process is quite lengthy in Canada, as you have just heard, and those are the 3 stages that you would have to go through if you don't have a license. So it's G1, G2, and then the full G license, which if you look at it, it really is taking you around 3 years just to get to a point where you have a full license. Now, if you are a person who has a driver's license already, so you have a driver's license already, and depending on which country you're coming from, some countries have agreements with the Canadian government, and you can literally do a swap. You hand in your driver's license from whatever other country you're from, and they give you an Ontario driver's license. You can check on the Canadian government's website if your country is if your country has an agreement with the Canadian government, and you can do that swap. But if you're from South Africa, as things stand right now, they don't have any agreements, and you would have to go through some tests. But there is a difference if you already have a driver's license. So number one, if you are somebody who has a driver's license, but you only have less than 2 years experience, you can be credited for 1 year's worth of driving experience. Now, what this means is that you take the G1, you will still have to take the written test, the G1 license, but what you don't have to do is wait for 8 months before you can take your G2 test. Unlike the person who doesn't have a license at all, has never had any driving experience, if you have at least 1 year driving experience, you can take the G1 written test and then skip the waiting period of 8 months and go do the G2 driving test, and then you have a G2 license. Now, the year that you can claim from having a license outside of Canada is you self-declaring and saying, I have had my driver's license for at least a year, and they take your driver's license, your actual driver's license, as proof that you do have driving experience, and you're self-declaring that you've driven for at least a year. That's what they can credit you for. Number two, if you're a person who has been driving for more than 2 years, if you have been driving for more than 2 years, you still have to do the G1 test. So you still have to do a sit down, written exam. It's online. So you still have to do the sit down online test, get the G1 test. But if you have more than 2 years of driving experience, you can skip the waiting period before you do the G2. You skip the G2 road test altogether. And then you also skip the 2 years that you would have to wait after getting the G2 test to go and do a full license. So if you're somebody who has been driving, you have your driver's license from outside of Canada, and you have been driving for more than 2 years, you can do G1, get your G1 license, and then skip right to doing the road test, the full G road test. And what they would need to see from you is proof. So you go to your license department. So if you're in South Africa, you would reach out to the license department, find out whatever process they have at the moment for you to get a letter from them that is an official document. It will state how long you have had your driver's license in South Africa. And if it's more than 2 years, then you can hand that in along with your driver's license when you're coming to Canada to get a driver's license at the license department. And you do your G1, so you can't skip that. You still have to do your G1, and then you skip all of the things. So your 2 years, your over 2 years experience gets you to skip and just take the G license. And then you pass that and you can get the full G license, where you're driving like a person, who has a normal license in South Africa. Now, this brings me to sharing some of the things that are very different to driving in South Africa that you will find when you're driving on the roads in Canada. So the first thing that I want to show you is in Canada, when you are at a traffic light. So if you're going to be turning right, you're at a traffic light, the traffic light is closed. If you're going to be turning right, you can turn even if the traffic light is red. So, in South Africa, if based on the way that we drive, it would basically mean that if you were to turn left, based on the side of the road that we drive, if you were turning left and the traffic light was red, you just have to stop and check that it's safe for you to turn. Like there's no cars that are coming onto the lane that you're trying to turn on, and you would be able to turn. That's not a thing in South Africa, right? You have to stop. You have to stop and wait for the traffic light to be green before you can proceed. But here in Ontario, it's legal. It is legal to turn right if the traffic light is red, and it's safe to do so. So you have to stop and look, and then you can turn. So that was one of the things when we first got here. We were stopping and we'd see cars moving, but we're like, dude, like the traffic light is red. You're supposed to stop. We stop, and then cars will like honk at us. And then it's like, okay, I guess we're gonna, until we started actually going through learning for the G1 test, and we were like, oh, it's actually a thing here. You can turn right even if the traffic light is red. So that was one of the interesting things. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, I'd love to show this to you, but because schools are closed and there's a lot of virtual learning, there's no school buses that are currently driving around that I can go take a video for you guys to see. But if you are driving on a street, you're going this way or you're going that way, and there's a school bus that stops. So I just drove past a place where they park just to show you the school buses. I'm pretty sure you've seen these school buses on TV, and you've probably seen some of the old ones that they ship down to African countries. I know I've seen one in South Africa. I'm not quite sure what they use them for there, but you've seen these buses, and these are the buses that are used here in Canada as well. And if you see a school bus that has stopped, so it'll pop out a stop sign, and then there'll be lights flashing at the front and at the back of the bus. If you see that, it means that the school kids either coming in or out of the bus. You have to stop. So you have to stop a certain distance away from the bus, at front of the bus, back of the bus, regardless of which direction you're going in. And it's also regardless of like the side of the road that you're on. So if the bus is on the other side and you're on this side, you do still have to stop. Depending, like when you're going through the test, you'll get to learn about all of the different things, but you stop. Bus offloads kids or onloads, gets them on, and when the stop sign closes and the lights stop flashing, then you can proceed to drive. And I just think to myself, it makes so much sense. Like, think of all the transports that have kids, the transport kids. I know it's not government transport in South Africa. It's private transports where people get their own 14 seaters or however many seaters, and they fetch kids and they take kids to back to their homes or to school. It would make sense to put the safety, like that priority on the safety of the kids, because when they get out of the car, kids can just run in the most random of directions before you even are able to say, hey, like they're gone. So it makes sense to me that cars stop, kids are offloaded, and when they are offloading their kids, I remember when we first got to Canada, our oldest son, who was going to school, he was in grade 1 at the time, he was using the bus. And they make sure that they're handing your child over to a person, like to somebody that they know, okay, this is the parent, the child, they know this person. And then they hand the child over. If there's nobody there, if it's a young child, I mean, for older kids, they know their way home. They can walk by themselves to go back home. But for younger kids, they will literally drive with the child back to school. Then you'll get a call as a parent. And I mean, you can't keep having your child drive back to school and you're getting called. Like, it's going to end up looking like you're neglecting your child. You're not taking care of them. But that was just from a driving perspective. It's one of those things that makes so much sense. Like, can we all do this around the world just to protect our kids? And then the other thing is an emergency stop. So if there are emergency vehicles around you, it's an ambulance, it's police, but there's sirens, their lights are flashing behind you. In South Africa, you are not required really to stop. Like, it's just like, everybody stop what you're doing. Like, these people need to come through. You slow down, you move out of their way. You definitely have to move out of their way so they can get through. Here in Canada, like, regardless of whether they're in that far lane from where you are and they can just pass, you have to stop. You have to move over and stop until they've passed. And then you can, and that was so different. That was a very different experience. It was different to witness, and I'm so happy that it's not something that happened before I actually got to go through the driver's license test process, because I didn't know just how different it is here when there is that type of emergency where there's an ambulance or it's police, but there's flashing lights and there's sirens behind you. Unlike South Africa, you don't just slow down a bit and check, okay, maybe they're on this lane, so you can carry on. Like, you're obviously not going to be trying to go as fast as you can, but you carry on if it's safe to do so, and you let them pass. Like, you give them way on whatever lane they are and they pass. you stop here. Like everybody stops. Everybody stops. Whatever lane you're driving in, whatever direction you're going, you stop. And to a certain extent, I mean, it really does make sense, because if there's an emergency, they're trying to get somebody to hospital or whatever is going on, you don't know where they're trying to go, right? They might be trying to turn, they might be trying to come to the lane that you're at. And if you're carrying on, like, it just delays the whole process. It delays the whole process, and it's an emergency. So that's another thing that, and I think that one it's a bit tricky to try and capture on video. But sure, you know, if it happens that I'm on the passenger seat and that type of situation happens, I'd be more than happy to, like, I'm ready now. Like, I'm so ready to whip out my camera and capture that, so I can show you just how it looks like you're in like a movie. It's just like, wow, okay. Like, everybody is like listening. I know in South Africa, like, and I'm sad to say this, but I've seen people where there is an emergency. You see cops with their sirens, and there's people who are just not bothered with moving. Could not be bothered. They will just stand there and be like, y'all guys are always just like with your sirens, and you're just rushing to go have lunch or something of the sort. So I think the mentality around emergencies and law enforcement people, and, you know, just everything it's been so different, because I've witnessed such differences between the two worlds. Let me know if there's something that you heard that you thought, wow, okay, that sounds a bit extreme, or that makes a lot of sense from the process of getting your driver's license and the other things that I shared on video. I'd love to hear from you, so do comment in the comment section and let me know what you found fascinating, if anything, and I will see you on the next video.
Thank you for watching.
Hello?
Can you, like, I don't know, like, mhlambe ukhulumele kamereni, or like I can hear you and you were closing something really loud.
Okay, sorry. Since I come in.
Okay, sharp. Oh, no, I don't even know where I was. Three times the charm, right? 3 times the charm. Hi everyone, and welcome